I have now gotten every skill in Tower Defense Simulator, including Scholar, the worst skill in Tower Defense Simulator. I have also nearly gotten every single logbook from the Null and Void event, including the Null Commander, which I had to pity kill for that, interestingly enough. I have every logbook except, interestingly, for Kronos. Kronos is the one that I'm missing. So I have nearly 100%ed Tower Defense Simulator's Null and Void event. The thing I'm missing is obviously Kronos' logbook, but I'm also missing the 2 achievements that give you the band crate. That is beating Night 3 with no special towers, and beating the game with the death curse enabled, and I think Mentin probably would help me do that. Okay, looks like we're about to do this. Very cool. So that is Death Touched, was it? Yeah, Death Touched achievement done on hard mode, which is where you beat a knight with the death curse. We did it in duo. It is possible to do it on solo, but it takes significantly longer. I don't know how long we did this, but I think it's about 25 minutes. 22 minutes, okay, so I think that's the fastest that I've ever seen someone do this. But yes, Death Touch achievement, very cool. And so that is 1,000 coins, 2 spin tickets, 5 Death Storms, 10 Necromancer Tombs, and 1 Band Crate. Woo. Triumph on hard mode with the Death Curse activated any night. Night 1 obviously being the easiest. And I now should have a Band Crate in my inventory. Hell yeah. But here I'm going to discuss the shadow updates that the developers have made to Tower Defense Simulator since v1.80.0. And the first thing I want to point out is the fact that the developers have reversed change that they made in v1.80.0, but they didn't announce. So in the index, if you go to maps and you were to go down to Winter Abyss, you'll realise that Winter Abyss actually, it has changed over into the old map. I don't know if you watched my video previously, but Winter Abyss, it was updated to a new map that I don't think Adversary had actually leaked. No, scrolling all the way back to like his UGC items created in 2022, and then to this, and then to this, like Nether, Infernal Abyss, Stained Temple, Lay-By, stuff like that, Retro Zone, Moonbase, Construction Crazy, Cyber City, Space City, Candy Valley. Yeah, we don't see this Winter Abyss rework here, so that's really odd that the developers did add it. But, interestingly enough, Legacy Winter Abyss actually still remains in the game, but you can only play this through elevators, so technically speaking, there are 2 maps in the game that are exactly the same, yet they have different names. So you have Legacy Winter Abyss, which is the old map, and you have Winter Abyss, which was reverted to the old map. The developers really fucked up here, so it looks like Winter Abyss was added by accident and the developers reverted it, but they forgot to remove Legacy Winter Abyss. I think this might have been part of an update that they meant to implement into December time or in 2 weeks time, because it is winter related. I would assume that it would be out for a Christmas update or a winter update, but the developers just decided to accidentally do it in this update, realised their mistake after I probably uploaded my video since they stalked my channel, and decided, whoops, let's revert that. But they didn't remove Legacy Winter Abyss. So 2 maps in the game, exactly the same, different achievements that you can beat. This, by the way, does not affect Midnight Issue. Midnight Issue is still a map in Tower Defense Simulator that you can only play through elevators. You cannot play this through matchmaking. But it's really interesting that they reverted Winter Abyss and not taken Midnight Issue offline. Next, we have a Demoman bug fix update, a fix that, I don't know if it's bug fix or it was just changing how the Demoman actually worked in Tower Defense Simulator, because previously the Demoman was unable to predict where an enemy would be when its projectile would land. Now, this isn't the case for many other explosive towers in Tower Defense Simulator. The Rocketeer is able to predict where an enemy is meant to be, and the Mortar is can actually predict where an enemy is meant to be. With the Demoman, it can predict where an enemy is meant to be, but it's not 100% accurate, or at least it was not 100% accurate. The thing is, though, it was most starkly seen when it came to enemies with the corpse modifier. So if I were to spawn in an enemy, say, I don't know, what's an enemy that has a highish amount of health, but let's see, test it. The abnormal with the molten corpse, as it's stated here. So if I were to do that, previously the Demoman wouldn't be able to actually track where the corpse would be. It would actually shoot in front of it because it would predict that based on the speed of the enemy, it would be in front of where the corpse would spawn. So for example, if the abnormal corpse was, say, here, and the Demoman were to shoot, it would actually shoot in front of it, so it would shoot here because of the speed of the abnormal. So let's do that again. So the way that the Demoman, the developers have fixed it in this update, so that is the corpse. The Demoman originally would shoot right in front of it and not deal any damage to the abnormal unless its explosion radius was large enough based on the skills that you had or the speed of the enemy. If an enemy was extremely quick, for example, like I don't know what enemy actually was most affected by this. The Fallen Rusher is affected by this the most, but the Fallen Rusher is an enemy that I don't think gets Molten Corpse. But if for example, a speedy enemy were to have a corpse and the Demoman were to shoot, it would shoot right in front of it because it was a speedy enemy, and it would predict that that enemy would be there instead of shooting where the corpse would be. However, as you just saw, the developers have now fixed this, but not entirely. So if I were to get a fast enemy, so the Fallen Rusher, as I stated previously, then the Fallen Rusher, it wouldn't actually be dealt full damage. Now, it's not because of the defense. The Fallen Rusher does have 80% defense, but the Demoman is not 100% accurate with its shot. It shoots, depending on how close the Fallen Rusher is to the Demoman, slightly in front of it. So if I was to do it here, look, the Demoman isn't 100% accurate with the Fallen Rusher. Sometimes it shoots slightly in front of it, sometimes it shoots slightly behind it. Now, enemies slower than the Fallen Rusher, aka most enemies in Tower Defense Simulator, they are nearly 95% accurate when it comes to the Demoman. So this issue really only affects extremely fast enemies such as the Fallen Rusher. However, it is safe to say that for the most part, the Demoman has now been fixed so that it can now, with relative accuracy, say 90% accuracy, hit most enemies. And even with the enemies that it doesn't hit, such as the Fallen Rusher, most of the time it will be dealt some damage. It won't be dealt full damage, the full 50 damage times by the 80% defense that the Fallen Rusher has, but it'll be at least some damage, so it's not completely missing some shots, as was the case when it came to the corpse and extremely fast enemies. Now actually, it was Nim who pointed this out, so I feel like the Snowballer wouldn't be dogshit if it couldn't miss. Apparently it does miss, I didn't know that. But the Nimothy did say that they did something with the Demoman they did something to the Demoman which they may do to the Snowballer. So in Null and Void Night 1, Demoman missing got patched, and it now always hits the enemy with its targeting. Yes, this was a change that was made 2 weeks ago, but nobody realized it until now. So the Demoman is now, even though Nim says it is 100% accurate or always accurate with its shots, it's not always the case. I'd reckon it is 90% accurate. And again, I suspect that the reason why the Demoman was fixed in Night 1 was because enemies in, I think the Null Beast in Night 1 is extremely fast, and the Demoman may have missed its shots there, so the developers decided to fix it. Next, we got a clarification of the update log, because the update log isn't accurate to what is being said, or doesn't explain what's being said fully. So, firstly, issue with the Xbox controller is because sometimes you weren't able to select special modes with the Xbox controller. Next, the issue with the Mako DJ booth is when you sold a tower with the Mako DJ booth effect with the songs surrounding it, or well, more accurately, the song notes. I don't know what they're called. I know they have a specific name in music nomenclature, but I don't know, I'm not really a music artist per se. So if I were to place down a Mako DJ booth here, and then I were to place, say, the freezer here, you'll notice, or should notice, that actually the freezer doesn't actually get the effects. Ah, okay, so it seems like if a tower is placed beside a Mako DJ booth, then it doesn't get the effect. But if the Mako DJ booth is then... Where is the effect? Hold on. I know it gives out some effects because I do see it, but I don't see it here. So maybe the developers have just messed up the effects when it comes. Okay, no, okay, so the freezer does have the effects now. So if I were to sell the Mako DJ booth, the effects would go. Yes, okay, so that is, previously it wouldn't go, and now it does now go, so at least in that regard, the developers have fixed it. However, if there is an issue where a tower has the Mako DJ booth effect, then loses it, it will never regain it. So this freezer here, because the Mako DJ booth was in range, I now sold it, it can no longer regain the effects. Now, on the grand scheme of things, this is a very small bug, and in fact, I prefer this bug over the previous bug, because with the previous bug, I'm sure it lagged out the game somewhat with the special effects from the song notes. I think that this effect, or this bug where the towers can't regain the song notes after they had it before the Mako DJ booth was sold, is less intrusive than lagging out the game with thousands of towers with the song notes, because it wouldn't be sold when wouldn't be removed when the Mako DJ booth was removed. Next, the bug fix for the Sandcastle barricade is apparently an enemy may be able to detect hitting the barricade a lot better than it did previously, although you can still collide with the back parts or like the pinwheels of the Sandcastle consumable. Apparently it was an issue where sometimes the Sandcastle barricade wouldn't accurately collide with enemies, although I don't know how much of an issue that was, given that the Sandcastle consumable wasn't used too often, at least from what I could see. But also, I swear in Tower Defense Simulator now, there are some issues with units not being able to collide with enemies. So, for example, the hacker converted enemies into units. I swear in like Night 3, I see them often just phasing through enemies without damaging them whatsoever. So I feel like there is still some issue when it comes to that. Next, when it comes to the Sandcastle emote or Sandcastle consumable being affected by timescale, previously the Sandcastle, if it was like a 0.5 timescale, the Sandcastle was still able to spawn in crabs at 0.5 or at 1 while at 0.5. So just to mention, if it was being spawned in at a 1 timescale while the timescale was at 0.5, basically the crabs would spawn in closer to each other. Now, I have reported on this in the past. I've just said that it's not that much of a big deal, except for the fact that in a shorter space of time, all of the crabs can be spawned out of the Sandcastle emote and potentially deal more, quote, DPS, because I guess the Sandcastle, it stays alive for the same period of time in the same timescale. It's just it is effectively all of the units spawned in closer together. So instead of 60 seconds that it takes, I don't know if it's 60 seconds or not, but theoretically if it was 60 seconds that it takes for the crabs to all spawn out, it would now take 30 seconds relative to gameplay time, in which case it is a slight buff, but barely noticeable, and given the fact that barely anyone uses the Sandcastle consumable nowadays anyways, I'd assume it's not that much of a big deal, but the developers have now fixed it. Next, the issue where apparently there were some issues with tower effects. Apparently they have now been better optimized. However, if you were to spawn in a tower, well, actually, it's more accurately seen when it comes to the commander. So if I were to place down a commander, and then I were to place down a tower next to the commander, and then I were to use the ability of the commander, you can see, yes, the tower has the ability, but if I were to sell this tower, the ability would stay around. And actually, if I were to timescale this to 2, for example, the ability effects actually stay around for after when the commander is meant to stop. So here, the commander is not buffing any towers nearby. I mean, in fact, there are no towers nearby, but still, the effects stay here. So I'm not sure if this is actually an optimization, since if there are a lot of towers that you sell in a short period of time around the commander and then resell it, so like macroing towers, for example, then yeah, it is very clearly an issue with lag in Tower Defense Simulator where this can cause it. Right, next, the developers mention an issue when it comes to the hacker coin cost instead of showing a gem cost. Now, it is actually the case where it is other towers that are affected by this. So, for example, the Crook boss was also showing sometimes 300 coins rather than 300 Robux. But if the main issue, it comes from actually the intermission lobby. So if you were to open your inventory, I have all of the towers, so it doesn't really affect me. But if you were to select the Crook boss, for example, instead of showing 300 Robux, it would show 300 coins here. Or, well, it should actually show locked, really, because you can't really buy the towers when you're here. But the developers have now fixed it, so it now shows the accurate cost, apparently, for the tower. So that includes the hacker tower, which when it showed gems, it was meant to show gems, but it instead showed coins. But when it came to the other hardcore towers, because they are ranks locked, it doesn't really affect them too much. But when it comes to the Necromancer, that was also fixed. The reason why the hacker tower is mentioned in the update log is because in the bug tracker it is listed as a hacker tower issue, but it is an issue with other towers such as the Necromancer, such as the Crook Boss, such as the Pursuit, which the developers have now fixed. And those are all of the shadow updates that the developers didn't elaborate on in the v1.80.0 update log. There are some shadow updates that the developers didn't mention in previous update logs, including a Night 2 nerf, but those will be saved for another video.